Hey, what's up, gang? We're back at it again. I'm gonna do a tier list for BT17. Can you imagine we have BT17 sets of these things? Haha. I started playing in BT10, so it has actually been a hot minute since we've been playing this game. And these are all the decks that I could possibly think of that may potentially be relevant. If you don't see your deck on here and you're like, whoa, what the heck, guy? Ask in the comments. Maybe I genuinely forgot about it, but realistically it's because I don't think your deck can make enough of a splash in the current format. Hell, dude, I'm even including Numon in here. All right, listen, we're trying to cope really hard, okay? So going over the list here, we've separated it into a couple different things, starting from the bottom up. Terabad. I don't think this deck is playable. Genuinely, I don't think you could win a locals. I don't think you could win a game at a locals unless you're going against something equally Terabad. Rogue are decks that I think can potentially like take a locals if you're lucky, but it's definitely a struggle and an uphill battle, and there are so many bad matchups for you that honestly you have to really enjoy the deck to a point that even if you get pub stomped with it, it doesn't feel too bad. Tier 2 decks, in my opinion, are decks that are like they maybe have like a good matchup into one of like the best decks in the format, but there are a lot of other problems kind of keeping the deck down. Either they have a lot of really bad matchups, or the deck itself is just kind of mediocre, and it kind of just makes use of a very niche interaction that it has with one of the best decks. Tier 1, I think, are decks that can actually compete. These are decks that I think you could take to a tournament and see some legitimate success with them, and possibly even see some more success with, but there's maybe like one or two things that are like stopping them from actually seeing play. Like maybe there's like a card that counters them completely, like a floodgate, or there's like a deck in the format that's seeing a lot of play right now that actually really hampers a lot of what it wants to do. But if you don't run into that matchup or run into that specific card, you actually see a lot of success. The Gatekeeper deck, or decks, I guess, because there are two of them, are decks that kind of define what decks are allowed to be considered the best deck or not. They aren't the best deck in the format, but there enough people are playing them because they're good enough to beat out most tier 1 decks and below, where they also, I think, have a horrible matchup into the what is considered, like, in my opinion, the best decks of the format. And then onto the best decks. I think these decks are ones where they have quote-unquote bad matchups, but most of it is very skill intensive, or requires your opponent to play very well or for you to play pretty poorly in order to lose, as well as they are not easy decks per se, but sometimes they'll play themselves, or if you have enough skill with one of these decks, you'll probably be able to take a win at any tournament. Yeah, let's go and get into it. TK here is representing security control. I think security control is in a really good spot in this format. Going into it, there's going to be a lot of decks that kind of just want to swing into your security a lot, and they can kind of lose out on that value over time. One of the best decks in the format bounces security, but that's something you can kind of play around by making it so that way they don't have enough memory to draw, but when they do their full combo, and they won't have things to bounce on your side of the field, which I think is something to be pretty cognizant of. Here we've got Blue Hybrid, but with the Gabumon engine. So using like the Matt Ishidas and stuff. I think this is genuinely one of the best decks in the format. I think it's just hampered by Digimon Emperor to a point that it feels like a different deck when your opponent plays a Digimon Emperor and when your opponent doesn't. I think that as of current, in the current meta, with everyone running Digimon, at least a couple copies of Digimon Emperor in a majority of the decks, it's pretty unfeasible to hope that you never run into a Digimon Emperor ever. So it feels like this deck is insane should your opponent not drop a Digimon Emperor, but it is stopped if they do. Beelstar is probably Rogue. I can definitely see it taking a couple games off of some of the best decks through like sheer luck and stuff, but it's just not what the format used to be. We are so much faster and able to, I think, build boards in such a way that doing a Beelstar and getting the free 7-cost option just doesn't hit the same like it used to. Red Hybrid. So I've delineated Red Hybrid from Ancient Greymon specifically, because the new Takuya is technically support for the old Red Hybrid playstyle. and I think it's fine. I think that there are decks that are as fast as it in the format that don't lose to as many cards as it does. It has the benefit of being able to play things like the 6-cost fire option that reduces Crimson Nova, and good stuff like that. I think it's a very aggressive deck, and the new support definitely does help as like just adding utility and options. But overarchingly, I think there are better decks in the format that you could be playing. This one is Black War, so this is Black War like control and stuff. I think I don't want to piss off the Black War players. It's probably low rogue, if I'm honest with you. There's just, again, there are so many decks that do what it wants to do, but better. Like if you set up, you're probably winning sometimes, compared to the good old days of like BT17 was when Black War X came out, and you're winning every time you were able to set up like a Black War X and your opponent didn't have an immediate answer. Speaking of decks that have not aged as well, War Grey Toolbox is also in a pretty rough spot. I think it is up probably towards like the tail end of tier 2, maybe the top of Rogue. I'll probably put it like towards the top of Rogue. I think we'll also adjust this. I think this is better than Secon, assuming your opponent doesn't drop Digimon Emperor. I could make like a tier just for it, just like Digimon loses to Digimon Emperor immediately, or loses to a single card tier. But War Grey Toolbox is good still. It's just slow. It's stack reliant, and you can be like, oh, well, a lot of decks are stack reliant. When I call a deck stack reliant, I mean like they have to stick their first stack, otherwise their game plan kind of fumbles for the next like 2 to 3 turns, which is game losing. If you can't recover after your opponent board wipes you, which most decks will be able to do in some capacity. Every deck has some kind of interaction with you now that you can't just be like, oh, well, I mean, I stuck my guy, and he has a protection, maybe 2 protections on him. If you got the full stack, and I got him out by turn 3, that's just not cutting it anymore. Most decks are online by their turn 2, or at least threatening a lot of stuff. A lot of decks have ways around your protection these days. A lot of decks have ways to recover should you raid into them and you did like 2, 3 to 4 checks. If you're not killing them in a single swing, you're probably going to lose the game, and putting yourself in that position, which requires you to have a lot of variance on your side, I think never really feels great. Hunters. I think Hunters are fine. They're okay. I think they do what Hunters does. Nothing has changed about them. I think that as more and more cards come out, they just keep getting pushed further and further down the tier list. Honestly, I think I'm being generous to them by putting in tier 2. As a very big Hunter enjoyer, I really like their playstyle, and I think they're really cool. I just think that sadly, the format is kind of, again, left them behind, which you'll see in a lot of these decks are just kind of like getting left behind by the way that cards are getting produced, but also in the ways that we're kind of deciding to play now. I know people complain a lot about power creep, but I think that the playstyles of the general player base has changed a lot to a point where kind of like fighting like lower end or trying to do like these giant stacks just don't work as well as they used to anymore. It's all about like controlling what your opponent does and setting up a board that is either recurable or unoutable or provides such an amount of pressure that your opponent won't be able to interact with it in a meaningful enough way that won't stop you from either killing them or setting up the same kind of board again the next turn. I feel like Hunters just isn't able to achieve something like that. Speaking of a deck that I assumed would be kind of left behind by the times, but honestly is probably the best deck in tier 2, Royal Knights. I put it up here just because I think that these hard play decks are really, really good and kind of interact pretty well into a lot of the current meta. I think that Royal Knights is worse than its Demon Lord counterpart, unfortunately. And since it's countered by the same cards, I think running it is probably just a mistake. So there's an argument for either tier 2 or Terra bad, purely because of the fact that if you're getting hit by the same cards that one of the best decks in the format is getting hit by, then it's probably not ideal. But I still think it's a really strong deck should you not get hit by those. Speaking of some pretty good decks, we got Mirage. I think I'm putting Mirage right here. I think Mirage is really good. I think Mirage is really strong. I think Mirage has the problem that there's a deck that does what Mirage kind of wants to do in the same color, just better. And so like you can play it. Like there's definitely a lot of like good support for Mirage that we've received in the past couple sets, but there's just a better deck that does what Mirage wants, in my opinion, in a more consistent and better way. Bellamon. Probably Rogue, honestly. Maybe Rogue, maybe bottom of tier 2, depending on the kind of list you're running. I've seen a lot of like Dark Masters-esque lists that have a lot of really good synergies and some fun here and there. Probably like towards the bottom of tier 2. I'm not sure how good those decks are. I've tried a little bit of them when it comes to like testing, but I've never been so impressed that I'm like, wow. Coming to, I think, our first Gatekeeper, we have Yellow Vaccine. Yellow Vaccine is so fast, consistent, able to put up Magna X, which by itself is a Gatekeeper card. I think this deck is really good. I think it's very strong, and I think that if you can't beat Yellow Vaccine, you're going to have a very rough time in this meta. And I think the decks, as listed here, have means and capability of doing it, and maybe some of the tier 2. I just don't think that Rogue is able to get up to that. Moving on, I think we have our first Terabad deck. I have not been impressed with Digipolice. I really have not, which is a shame because I think those kind of flood decks are really interesting, especially into this current meta. But I think there's a lot of cards that hurt Digipolice, that hurt the best decks. So again, kind of in the same realm as like Royal Knights. I just feel like even without those cards in the format, your deck is still not really hitting where I'd want you to be hitting. So I'm gonna have to put it in Terabad. Up next, we've got, it's probably the best deck in Terabad, maybe low Rogue. There's an argument maybe higher in Rogue, but I think it is just Terabad. We got Tyrant. Tyrant is probably here. Middle pack of tier 2. Why play Tyrant when you could just play something that does what Tyrant wants, but quite literally better? Better in every way, in fact. The only thing you lose to is the fact that Tyrant is a little bit bigger, but that doesn't matter. And no one really cares. And it just doesn't matter. I'm sorry, Tyrant, it just doesn't matter. Up next, we've got Malomyotismon in the Myosmon deck. Yeah, okay, anyways. We'll go ahead, we're gonna skip this one for now, and we'll go into Dexteruga. I think this deck is really good. I think this deck is actually super, super strong. I think it has some ways to interact with a lot of cards in the current meta. I think it has a bad matchup, unfortunately, against one of the best decks, which probably bumps it down below Gabu Blue Hybrid, but it's still really good. And I would suggest playing it if you guys really want like a fun, interactive, play from the grave style deck. Next, we've got the Omni Ace deck. Probably towards the top end of tier 2, I'd put this deck. It's really good. It's able to get consistent access to your Omni. Your Megas have some pretty good on-play effects. You have a really good engine with your bottom end, be it the Gabumon line or the Agumon line. I personally prefer the Gabumon line, but to each their own. Your Tamers feel really impactful and strong, and then the Omni Ace with the option feels really hard to get rid of. Unfortunately, there's a lot of decks in the format that kind of still just get rid of it and no one cares, which feels kind of bad. And even if you do Omni Ace, it's like, meh. Like, you don't kill your opponent off of it, and then if they do remove it, they do gain 5 memory, which is nothing to scoff at, unfortunately. Next, we've got Alphamon, probably in the Terabad. I think Alphamon's really cool. I think it's got a lot of cool support. I just think that with the cards that are currently still on the ban list, as well as it just not being the kind of playstyle that leads to success these days, it's kind of mid. Speaking of a deck that just won't fucking die, jeez. Leave me alone. I hate Blue Flare. But Blue Flare refuses to leave. It will stay in the format forever. I think Blue Flare is really good. It's able to match the speed of Numon. It's able to match the speed of Ancient Gurumon. The problem is, it's just, that's all it does, is it matches their speed, doesn't match their utility. It doesn't match their control, it doesn't match their, it doesn't even match their aggression sometimes. It just matches the ability to like kind of spit out your bodies really quickly. It's a very linear game plan, I think, compared to some of the other options you have available to you, but nonetheless, a very strong linear game plan. Bloom Lord. Ooh, Bloom Lord probably goes. Ooh, probably below Red Hybrid. I think Bloom Lord's good. Again, a really strong kind of linear game plan that has Quartz 1 as a good fallback, but Quartz 1 hasn't been the end-all be-all savior that it used to be a couple sets ago. And even then, it wasn't the end-all be-all savior. It's kind of just Quartz isn't going to save you. And if you can't kill him a single turn with Bloom into like another Bloom, you're going to lose. Hydra can only take you so far as a control tool. Unfortunately, I think this deck just needs some new support to really pump some new blood into it. It's still a fine deck. You can definitely see some success with it. I just don't think it's where it used to be. This seems like a tale of just me shitting on old decks. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Crossheart. You're probably in Terra bad. Until we see some new support, I think that the only playable version of you is the OTK version, and even then, that deck feels kind of mediocre. Oh, poor Machine. Oh, poor Machine. Ooh, yeah, probably here. I'm sorry, Machine Dramon. Again, a lot of these decks that are going to end up down here are just kind of suffering from the same problem, which we'll just go ahead and put a couple of these. I'm sorry, Gamamon. Yeah, I'm sorry, Gamamon. You're probably here. I think this order is probably fine for them. Yeah, I'm sorry. I just wanted to put you guys down there real quick. I don't want to talk too much about you guys because it's sad. It's sad where you guys are right now. Devas. Devas. Oof. What to say about Devas? Why play them? There's literally just a better deck in the format that does what Devas want to do, but better. But just better. I think Devas has some good utility against Numon, and that's it. That's legitimately it. That's all you have going for you these days, and that's super, super rough. Yeah, it's just a hard time for Devas. Terrier. I really like the Terriermon deck. Honestly, argumentatively, best deck in Tier 2. I will put it at the top of Tier 1. I think the Terriermon deck is insane. It's super fast. The Rapid X has a great matchup into some of the best decks of the format, and it's just really good. It's just really, really good. It's just unfortunate that I don't think it matches up and is able to carry through a lot of what the decks above it are able to. I think this deck is easily, though, the capstone of Tier 2, and you could definitely win an Ultimate Cup or Regional with Terriermon, just to clarify. Shine. Honestly, same spot as Terrier. Really, really good deck. The problem is it's just a little inconsistent, which is weird considering how many consistency tools you need to have. But the problem with a deck like Shine is that it has to be so consistent because it doesn't interact with your opponent's deck in the same way that something like Numon does. Because Numon is fast and consistent, but it's able to interact with your opponent, so it doesn't have to have like a huge like pop-off turn. It's able to kind of like take it a little bit slower if it doesn't have like those insane hands. Whereas Shine, it needs those insane hands in order to exist. If you don't have everything, you will lose the game before you find everything, and that feels really bad. Fenrir. I think Fenrir is super good. I'd probably put it here. I think this version of Fenrir is probably dead middle of the pack. It's able to kind of exist in a lot of different ways. I think it just has a hard time against the best decks, which is really unfortunate. We've got Dark Masters Control. I think it's better than Dexter Ruga is the question. I think it could be Dexter Ruga. I'm gonna put it here. Alright, maybe it's my bias showing. I think it could. Dark Masters Control is a really strong deck, and once again, we were getting a ton of support for it in this new set. The only problem this deck has currently is that a lot of the decks in the top right now, and by a lot, I mean the ones above it in this Tier 1 bracket, as well as the ones in the best deck, play in, specifically one of the ones in the best deck, play in such a way that I think eats this deck alive, and that's never where you want to be. Ancient bouncing your level 6s, so that way you don't get your aces, is really rough. Getting rid of your level 6s is really annoying. You don't really have a great way to protect yourself. Demon Lords is a rough matchup as well. Like, you can still win for sure. It's not like a stomp, but it is a slog that you kind of have to get through. Takazuchi is also just rough because they play on such a weird axis. Imperial's awful for you. Like, it's just... a lot of the decks that are above you in the tier list really do hamper what I think would be an amazing format for you, which is you beat the Gatekeepers and you beat Nume. You beat the traditional Fenrir. You beat Seccon. Like, you beat a lot of these decks that I think are prominent. The problem is, I think, about the other half of them cause you some tough times. Speaking of tough times, Imperial. Pyldra is insane. Imperial is insane. The new option is really nice for utility. It's just a really strong and good deck. The new Imperial Dramon Paladin mode is also really good. I think it's just a really fantastic deck that's able to do a lot, and it helps that, you know what, it's a fan favorite, so you'll probably see a lot of it. So keep that in mind. Okay, I think it's probably worse than Crosshearts right now. Melga. Melga was the deck that I started playing for the first time because it was super cheap. I bought it at low rarity, and I ended up winning a couple of online tournaments, and I saw a lot of success with it. It won me so many boxes. It was my favorite deck for a hot minute. I played it up until portions of BT13, maybe this EX set after BT13. It was so fun. I really love this deck a lot. It's just worse than what Ancient can do right now. It's just worse than what the Gabu Bond variant can do. Hell, it's worse than, in my opinion, in the aggression playstyle that like Imperial can do. It falls into the same category that Wargrey is. It's just, what can you do? Though I will say the Terabad list is probably a bit too big, so we're gonna bump these guys up a little bit. I think these guys are probably good here, and then we'll probably move, like, I think the Black War variant. I think Digiplease is probably the best at Rogue. I think this guy's probably better than Wargrey. And I think this is probably more fair. This is probably more fair. All Force, same thing. I think it's worse than any deck except for Mallow. I think it's worse than any deck except for Mallow. Sorry, All Force. There's not much I can say there. Levia, though. Levia, I think is probably, dare I say it, bottom of tier 1. Tamer Hate's in right now, team. Tamer Hate is in right now. It hurts Nume. Nume is kind of, if they don't just blitz you down, Nume has a hard time against you. Unironically, I think Levia is kind of a sleeper pick. A deck that isn't a sleeper pick, but does have the same issues as the Gabu variant. These two are kind of interchangeable in my mind. I think they're both really good. They're kind of kept out of the best deck spot because of the fact that they just lose to a card. If your opponent drops a Chikuri, which they will be running, you are suffering heavily. Giving a Numon player like 10 memory to delete a level 3. Oh, never a good spot. They also can kind of stop you from accelerating as quickly as possible too. And then Ancient also just bounces. Will just be bouncing. The only thing that you have against Nume and Ancient is like Lucamon, the new one. But I mean, that's only a 4 in your deck. You can't be relying on that just to win you a game because they're gonna go through it a couple times. Mastemon, I think, is probably here. I'm gonna bump you down a little bit, dog. You're not up there. You don't belong up there. The rest of you, I think, probably do. I think Mastemon is just lacking something. I'm not sure what it is lacking. It's fast. It's able to pump out Mastemon really quick. It's able to kind of like do their whole shenanigans. It just doesn't feel great. It doesn't feel fantastic. It feels kind of lacking. Beals, I think, probably belongs in tier 2. It just does what Beelsmon does. You're just trying to kill your opponent before they can do their things. That's not really as feasible as it used to be because everyone's kind of as fast as you are now when it comes to setting up their stuff. But I mean, it's definitely an option. The Sylphimon like Valkyrie Ace deck I think is definitely rogue. Probably better than most rogue decks though. It's consistent. It will do a lot of cool things, and Valkyriemon is a house. It doesn't get you where you kind of want to go, but it is a house nonetheless. Phoenix is... I'll capstone it. I think this is probably the best deck in Rogue. And now hear me out. It loses to Rogue. I don't have Ragnarlord on this list. I think Ragnarlord probably goes in the same spot as Phoenix here, and they're interchangeable. And here's why. They actually have a pretty good Numon matchup, and they have a pretty decent Yellow Vaccine and Magnet X matchup. Hell, they may even have a decent Ancient Guru matchup. I haven't checked into it. The problem is that Birds and Ragna lose to like every other card in Tier 1 and Tier 2, and a lot in Rogue as well, which is so sad because they're set up to beat the best decks. They genuinely are, but the problem is that they just flounder if they ever run into like a Pyldramon deck or a Gates of the Gates deck, or even like a Dark Masters deck. Like genuinely, it causes severe suffering in my heart to say that Ragna and Phoenix, this is their moment to shine, and even now they are still suffering because there are too many decks in the format, specifically in Tier 1 that I think are viable to take and see success with, which is so sad. Magna X, right here. Again, interchangeable spots here, team. Interchangeable spots. This order does not matter. What does matter is that it's a guard dog. I've mentioned this in prior videos. It really is just a guard dog. Ancient and Numon do not care about Magna X at all. But every other deck in the format, with excusing some like notable exceptions, really fucking hate Magna X. God, do they despise him. He is huge. He is unaffected, and he does that double checking every time. Hell, your Magna X can kill your opponent on like turn 3, which is crazy. You can just go Jess X, get an extra security check going, do like a Zubagon punch, or even fucking the 1-cost red option for armor form. Like, there's so many ways to kind of just kill your opponent and be aggressive, and you don't have to because you're so safe. And a lot of your decks are so memory efficient. It just doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. It's so sad that the top decks, I think, really do just abuse Magna X as a way of keeping some of these maybe more contentious decks away from them. Gallantmon. Probably worse than Digipolice, honestly. It's fine. The new support's cool. Gives him a blocker, gives him some defensive utility, which is really cool. The new rookie champion, really mid. The ultimate, you can argue it has some good uses. Just kind of rough, kind of middling all around. I'm very unimpressed with the new support. I think overarchingly, I think the only good thing was the ace, and even that is fine. It's okay. You're never really gonna get the ace effect, but it's a deck. It's a deck. Ancient Greymon though probably goes pretty comfortably. Probably put it towards the top end of Tier 2. Ancient is strong. It's aggressive. It's fast. It's like it's like the red hybrid of the past couple formats, but just a little bit quicker, a little bit more aggressive. Floats a little bit more. Is able to kind of take huge swings without expending a fuck ton of resources, and we'll kind of do it out of nowhere. It's worse than its blue counterpart though. So Eosmon. It's okay. It's okay. I probably put it like towards the bottom of Rogue. probably the best deck in Terabad. I'll capstone Terabad now. Here we go. We'll capstone another one. Capstoning Terabad with Eosmon. The new support's super good for the deck. Insanely good for the deck. I just don't think it matters. Very few decks in the format care about Tamers right now, aside from one, and even that one, it's like, okay, that's cool. You're just slow. You're just kind of slow. I didn't play enough with the new support to really give a firm decision, so maybe I'm highly undervaluing this deck, and that's something that you should keep in mind when I'm, speaking. Can make up Takamizuchi Fenrir. I'm gonna go ahead and capstone another deck, another list here. The best deck in tier 1, in my opinion, is Fenrir Takamizuchi. This deck is so good, so consistent, is very, very strong, and you should be afraid of it, and you should be thinking about it. I think the only reason I don't put it into the best decks format or the category is purely because I don't think it's seen enough tops as compared to its counterparts that are in that tier. My testing against this deck, it has felt a little high rolly, and sometimes you just don't find it, which feels bad. But when you do find it, it does feel really fucking strong. So I feel very comfortable putting it here at like best deck of the format. I think that these three are really, really good. I mean, this one's definitely best, and then followed by these two in like a very, very close second place. Oh, I think the only reason that Takamizuchi beats these two consistently is the fact that these two have cards that are designed to just hate them. Fishies. No amount of support, I think, will get this deck off the fucking ground. Holy, they get waves and waves and waves, and it's just never enough to really do it. I think they need something new, something fresh, because the fish in the market are looking a little ripe. We really need something new. Davis has a better game plan than this. This is a better game plan than this. I'll put a Shaka right here. I wanted this deck to be good so bad. It was so cool. I love Sec Minus, but man, it is just uninspired, boring, bad, slow, inconsistent, not powerful. Some decks don't even care. Yeah, just kind of mid. Diaboromon and its counterpart, which I forgot to add in, but we'll go over in a second. Diaboromon probably goes comfortably here. It's a really good deck. I think it's pretty consistent in what it wants to do. It's pretty strong. I just don't think it matches up to the cards above it in the list. The clock version of the deck goes right here in the Terabad tier, probably down here with Shakamon in them. I'm sorry, gang. It's just super mid. It's just kind of, wow, you're not great. Let's put the two obvious ones where they're going to go. This is kind of interchangeable. I personally prefer Numon a little bit more, but I will definitely be playing, I think, Ancient Guru and the Gabu Guru a lot this format. Just because I think these decks are really fun, really good, really consistent, and kind of, I don't want to say depressing, but overpowering. They are just dominant. They are just dominant, and I think that those of you who have hated Numon since BT15, I'm sorry to say, come BT17, Numon will still be the top dog, unless something changes. It definitely has a contender. It definitely has a contender, and there's an argument that Numon has kind of fallen from that top spot, because a lot of things that Numon wants to do don't really interact with Ancient Garurumon in the ways that it want to. Even Valkacing isn't as good as it used to be, Because if you Valkyrie Ace and Ancient Guru while they're swinging, cool, it gets deleted, but it was gonna get deleted anyways. And we weren't gonna go into another Digimon anyways, because it's your turn already. And we get our stuff back already. And we're chilling, and it doesn't matter. And we bounced a body too, so that's 2 checks right there. Like, good luck. And that's just sad. I think that these 2 decks are really good. I think the reason I put Numon slightly above Ancient Guru is because Ancient Guru also has a floodgate that is targeted specifically towards it, which is hilarious. And there's only 1 floodgate of that kind. Specifically, it's in black too. What a coincidence that the only version of that floodgate exists in the deck that I think would need it the most, being Numon. If they find that floodgate, you slow down a lot. You have a lot harder time. And the reason that I didn't put it in some of the lower tiers here with like the Gabu or the Gates is that only Numamon can comfortably play Kokuwamon. No other deck in tier 1 can comfortably play it besides maybe Dex. And even then, your engine is really tight. You don't want to be kind of feeling floodgates. So it's so funny to me that the only deck in the format that can not only afford to run a floodgate for its compatriots in like best decks in the format, but also can is Numamon. For those of you who don't know, I believe it's BT7 Kokuwamon. Mixed up where your opponent can't ignore Digivolution requirements. That hurts things like what does it hurt aside from this? Probably like I don't think like maybe the 3-cost option, the Awakening of the Golden Light, may specify. But it hurts so few decks. But it is in every top Numon list for one specific reason, because the other best deck in the format is hurt pretty heavily by it. But that's BT17 team. Love it or hate it, this is, I think, what you're going to be seeing going forward is a majority of this little quadrant here, and then the rest of this kind of intermittently. Those of you who feel that Numon is causing the game to get a little bit stale, I hear you, I understand you, and I am cooking. First and foremost, I want to release a Gabu list. I think this deck is really good. Okay, I think it is really good. It loses to Digimon Emperor, and I can't find a way for the life of me to realistically get around that card, which is unfortunate. But, this is a big but, I think it's still pretty solid, even with Digimon Emperor in the format. That's why I think Gate's still a good deck, even if Chikuri and Psycho are in the format. I think if you want to beat Numamon, I'm cooking. For those of you out there, don't worry. I haven't given up hope yet. As a Numamon enjoyer, as the #1 Numamon enjoyer in the world, alright? The deck could take me the furthest in any tournament. Fear not. But anyways, this is BT17 in my opinion, and I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day.